The year is 53 BCE. The Roman Republic, a colossal power bestriding the Mediterranean world, is at the zenith of its ambition, yet also teetering on the brink of internal strife. Within this cauldron of power and intrigue, Marcus Licinius Crassus, reputedly the wealthiest man in Rome, a veteran politician and a key member of the First Triumvirate alongside Julius Caesar and Pompey the Great, yearns for one thing that has largely eluded him: true military glory. Caesar has Gaul, Pompey his eastern victories. Crassus, his past military successes overshadowed, seeks his own Alexander-esque triumph. His target, the formidable Parthian Empire, a powerful and enigmatic civilization whose mounted archers and heavy cataphract cavalry ruled the vast territories east of the Euphrates. For Rome, this was a new frontier, a land of rumored riches and unknown dangers, a cold case file of sorts. As little was truly understood about the Parthian military machine. The initial crisis begins not with a subtle omen, but with an act of profound, almost reckless ambition. Crassus, as governor of Syria, amasses a colossal army, 18 legions, numbering some 40,000 elite Roman infantry, 4,000 light troops, and, crucially, a contingent of 1,000 highly skilled Gallic cavalrymen, led by his brave and capable son, Publius Licinius Crassus. Their mission: to conquer Parthia, to add its fabled wealth to Rome's coffers, and to etch Crassus's name into the annals of military legend. The stakes were immense. The prestige of Rome, the lives of tens of thousands of its finest soldiers, and the personal fortune and reputation of Crassus himself. The mystery and challenge facing Crassus and his legions as they marched out of Roman Syria and into the arid, sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia was the Parthian way of war. It was unlike anything the Romans had systematically encountered. Their infantry-centric legions, masters of close-quarter combat, were ill-suited to the vast, open terrain and the hit-and-run tactics of the Parthian horse archers. These mounted warriors, capable of firing devastating volleys of arrows while galloping, even while retreating, the famed Parthian shot, could harass, exhaust, and decimate an enemy without ever engaging in a pitched battle. The initial forensic observations of the campaign, as recorded by later Roman historians like Plutarch and Cassius Dio, are filled with ominous portents and tactical blunders. Crassus, ignoring the advice of his more experienced Armenian allies to take a safer, mountainous route, chose a direct path across the desert, lured by an Arab chieftain named Ariamnes, who was secretly in league with the Parthians. This decision, driven by impatience and a desire for a swift victory, would prove fatal. The key figures in this unfolding tragedy are, of course, Marcus Crassus himself, arrogant, overconfident, driven by a hunger for glory that blinded him to the realities of this new theater of war. His son, Publius, a proven and popular commander who had served with distinction under Caesar in Gaul, represents a younger, perhaps more adaptable generation, but one ultimately bound by loyalty to his father. On the Parthian side, the brilliant general Serena, commander of the Parthian forces, a figure of almost mythical prowess, becomes the enigmatic antagonist, his tactics baffling and terrifying the Roman legions. Our modern investigators are the historians, archaeologists, and military analysts who have pored over the ancient accounts for centuries, trying to piece together the exact sequence of events and understand the true scale of the disaster that followed. The decision to act by Crassus, to push deep into hostile territory, far from his supply lines, relying on flawed intelligence and underestimating his enemy, was the catalyst for the catastrophe. His ancient quest for glory led his army into a meticulously prepared trap near the small town of Carrhae in modern-day Turkey, in the heart of a featureless, sun-scorched plain. General Serena finally sprang his ambush. The Roman legions, marching in a hollow square formation to protect against attack from all sides, suddenly found themselves surrounded by a swirling, seemingly endless cloud of Parthian horse archers. The initial steps and deepening questions of the battle itself, as recorded by the horrified Roman survivors, paint a picture of utter chaos and despair. The Parthians refused to close for hand-to-hand combat. Instead, they circled the Roman square, unleashing relentless volleys of heavy, armor-piercing arrows that rained down upon the densely packed legionaries. The Roman shields, designed to stop swords and spears, offered little protection against these powerful projectiles. The famed Roman discipline began to waver under the ceaseless, invisible assault. Attempts by the Romans to charge the Parthians were futile. The horse archers would simply feign retreat, luring the Romans further out, then turn and shower them with more arrows. When the Roman javelins, pila, were exhausted, their primary ranged weapon was gone. It was at this point that Crassus made another fateful decision, a desperate attempt to break the Parthian encirclement. He ordered his son, Publius, to take his elite Gallic cavalry, along with supporting archers and infantry cohorts, and charge the Parthian line. Publius, brave and eager, obeyed. This was a lead that promised a breakthrough. The Gauls, renowned for their ferocity, crashed into a section of the Parthian horse archers, who seemed to give way. Publius, sensing victory, pressed his pursuit, unaware he was being drawn further and further away from the main Roman body into another, even deadlier trap. The puzzling clue that should have warned Publius was the Parthians' feigned retreat, a classic steppe nomad tactic. Once Publius and his contingent were sufficiently isolated, a massive force of Parthian heavy cataphracts, elite warriors clad head to toe in scale armor, riding armored horses, and wielding long, heavy lances, kontos, emerged from the dust and haze, crashing into the exposed flank of Publius's force. The Gallic cavalry, lightly armored by comparison, were overwhelmed. The ensuing slaughter was horrific. Publius himself, seeing all was lost and refusing to be captured, ordered one of his own men to kill him. Of his entire detachment of several thousand, only a few hundred managed to fight their way back to the main Roman square, bringing with them the devastating news of Publius's death and the destruction of his force. The sight of Publius's head, impaled on a Parthian spear and paraded before the main Roman army, shattered what little morale remained. Crassus himself, witnessing his son's gruesome fate, seemed to break. The Roman legions, now surrounded, demoralized, and rapidly running out of water under the blistering desert sun, endured hours more of the relentless arrow storm. As night fell, offering a temporary respite, the Parthians continued their psychological warfare, beating drums and letting out terrifying war cries throughout the darkness, preventing the Romans from resting or regrouping. The depth of the crisis was now absolute. Crassus, urged by his surviving officers, attempted a desperate night retreat towards the nearby town of Carrhae, abandoning thousands of his wounded men to their fate. The retreat was chaotic, disorganized, and relentlessly harassed by the Parthians. Many legionaries became lost in the darkness, cut off, and slaughtered. Crassus and a remnant of his army managed to reach Carrhae, but it was a temporary refuge, not a salvation. The town was ill-equipped for a siege, and the Parthians quickly surrounded it. The initial attempts by the mythical characters, Crassus and his legions, to achieve their goal of conquest had not just failed, they had resulted in a disaster of almost unimaginable proportions. The Roman military machine, believed to be invincible, had been broken by an enemy whose tactics they did not understand and whose resilience they had fatally underestimated. The evidence emerging from this first phase of the campaign was not of Roman glory, but of Roman vulnerability. The historical investigation by later Roman chroniclers would paint Carrhae as one of Rome's most shameful and devastating defeats, a wound that would fester for generations. As Crassus and his beleaguered survivors huddled within the walls of Carrhae, with Serena's victorious army camped outside, a new and even more terrifying phase of their ordeal was about to begin. Lured into a false parley by Serena, Crassus himself would be betrayed and killed, his head allegedly filled with molten gold by the Parthians, a macabre mockery of his legendary avarice. But what of the thousands of Roman legionaries taken captive? Ancient sources, particularly Pliny the Elder, mention a large body of Crassus's legionaries, perhaps as many as 10,000 survivors of the battle and its aftermath, being marched east by the Parthians, settled in the remote region of Margiana, near modern-day Turkmenistan, on the far eastern frontier of the Parthian Empire. It is here that the cold case file of the Lost Legion truly opens. What became of these men? Did they perish in captivity? Did they assimilate into local populations? Or, as a tantalizing and controversial theory suggests, did some of them continue their journey even further east, eventually encountering another great empire of antiquity, Han Dynasty China? The golden eagles of Rome had fallen in the Parthian dust. The fate of the men who carried them was now an enigma, their story a blank page waiting centuries, even millennia, to be filled with perplexing clues and startling resurfacing truths. The initial investigation into their fate by Rome yielded only silence, a chilling testament to the vast unknown world that lay beyond their eastern borders. The mystery of what happened after Carrhae, and the potential for a Roman legion to have reached the edge of China, was a secret buried deep in the heart of Asia, waiting for time, chance, and modern inquiry to unearth. The immediate aftermath of the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BCE was a scene of unparalleled disaster for Rome. Marcus Licinius Crassus, the ambitious triumvir, lay dead, his dreams of eastern conquest shattered alongside his legions. His severed head, legend claims, was used as a gruesome prop in a Parthian theatrical performance. But while Crassus's personal ambition met a grisly end, the fate of thousands of his captured legionaries became one of history's most enduring military mysteries, a grueling quest for survival that led them into the vast, unknown territories far beyond Rome's grasp. Our investigation deepens as we follow the faint trail of these lost soldiers, sifting through fragmented ancient accounts and intriguing, though often contested, modern theories. The intensive efforts for survival by the captured Romans must have been horrific. Ancient sources, notably Pliny the Elder and Horace, confirm that a significant number of legionaries, possibly numbering around 10,000, were taken prisoner by the victorious Parthians under General Surena. These were not just ordinary foot soldiers. They included hardened veterans, skilled engineers, and disciplined cohorts. Instead of being executed or sold into nearby slave markets, these captives were marched eastwards, a journey of immense hardship across arid plains and rugged mountains, to the remote Parthian frontier province of Margiana. This region, corresponding roughly to modern-day Turkmenistan and parts of Afghanistan, was a strategic buffer zone for the Parthian Empire, bordering the nomadic Scythian and Xiongnu territories. The Parthians likely intended to use the Roman captives as a frontier guard, settling them in this distant land to defend against incursions from the steppes. This was a common practice in the ancient world, relocating captured soldiers to serve as a buffer force in volatile border regions. The deepening crisis for these legionaries was their complete isolation. They were thousands of miles from Rome, cut off from their culture, their families, and any hope of rescue. The journey to Margiana itself would have been an ordeal, a death march for many, through harsh climates and hostile lands. Those who survived would have faced a new life in an alien environment, forced to serve the very empire that had destroyed their legions and killed their comrades. The psychological toll, the loss of their eagles, the sacred standards of their legions, symbols of Roman honor and invincibility, would have been devastating. The environmental and magical forensics in this part of the story are less about literal magic and more about the magic of survival against overwhelming odds, and the forensic piecing together of scattered clues across vast geographical and chronological distances. The environment of Margiana was harsh, a land of deserts and oases, far different from the Mediterranean world the Romans knew. They would have had to adapt to new climates, new foods, new local customs, and the constant threat from nomadic raiders. The historical and prophetic investigation now turns to a tantalizing but highly debated theory, first proposed in detail by the Oxford sinologist Homer H. Dubbs in the 1940s and 50s. Dubbs meticulously examined ancient Chinese historical texts, specifically the Han Shu, Book of Han, by Ban Gu. He focused on accounts of a battle fought in 36 BCE between the Han Dynasty Chinese forces and a Xiongnu chieftain named Zizi Chanyu, near the Talas River in modern-day Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan. This was nearly 2 decades after Carrhae. The Han Shu describes Zizi's forces as including a contingent of peculiar foreign mercenaries who fought in a fish-scale formation, a description that Dubbs argued strongly resembled the Roman testudo, or tortoise formation, where legionaries would interlock their shields to form a protective shell. The account also mentions these warriors using double wooden palisades or stockades around their encampment, another characteristic Roman military engineering practice. This is the startling artifact resurfacing or chilling discovery in our narrative, not a physical object initially, but a textual one. A description in a distant land's historical annals that seems to echo Roman military practices. Could these fish-scale warriors, fighting alongside the Xiongnu against the Han Chinese, have been the remnants or descendants of Crassus's lost legionaries? Had they, after being settled in Margiana by the Parthians, perhaps been captured again by the Xiongnu, or even hired themselves out as mercenaries, drifting further and further east in a desperate odyssey? The developing character dynamics and reactions of these hypothetical Roman survivors in the East would have been complex. Stripped of their Roman identity, their eagles lost, their commanders dead, they would have faced a profound crisis of loyalty and purpose. Some may have assimilated into Parthian or local cultures. Others, perhaps holding onto a sliver of Roman discipline and pride, might have sought service as soldiers of fortune, their unique military skills highly valued in the turbulent borderlands of Central Asia. If they did indeed end up fighting for Zizi Chanyu, their reaction to encountering another powerful organized empire like Han China would have been one of grim familiarity. Another battle for survival in a world that had become entirely alien. The rising complexity of this theory lies in the interpretation of the Chinese texts and the vast distances involved. The term fish-scale formation, Yulingen, is not exclusively Roman. Other cultures used disciplined, shielded infantry formations. The double palisade, while a Roman practice, was also not unique. Critics of Dubbs's theory point to the lack of definitive archaeological evidence. Roman weapons, armor, or inscriptions, directly linking these warriors to Crassus's legion. Furthermore, the journey from Margiana to the Talas River region is another immense trek across formidable terrain. However, proponents point to other intriguing, though circumstantial, clues. The Han Shu mentions that after defeating Zizi, the Han Chinese captured some of these foreign warriors and settled them in a newly established frontier county called Lichen in modern Gansu province. The name Lichen itself is a subject of debate. Some scholars suggest it was the ancient Chinese name for Alexandria in Egypt, and by extension, for Rome or the Roman world. Could a town in remote China have been named after Rome because its inhabitants were believed to be Romans? This is a tantalizing, ominous portent, or perhaps a hopeful echo. Modern environmental forensics, in this context, involves archaeological surveys in areas like ancient Margiana and around the supposed location of Lichian. While no definitive Roman military camp has been found that can be unequivocally linked to Crassus's legionaries in these Far Eastern locations, some archaeological finds in Central Asia do show Roman influence, likely through trade along the Silk Road. The challenge is to distinguish between general Roman trade goods or cultural influences and the actual presence of a settled Roman military contingent. The investigation deepens with genetic studies. In recent decades, some residents of the area around Yongchang, the modern county encompassing the ancient Lycian, have been found to possess genetic markers more common in European populations. And some individuals exhibit physical traits like lighter hair or eye color. This has been seized upon by some as evidence of Roman ancestry. However, the Silk Road was a melting pot of cultures for centuries, and migrations from west to east were not uncommon. These genetic findings are intriguing, but not conclusive proof of a direct link to Crassus's lost legion. They are another frustrating dead end, or at best, a highly suggestive but unproven lead. The grueling fight for these lost Romans, if Dubbs's theory holds any water, would have been one of cultural and physical survival over decades, across empires, far from anything they had ever known. Their small, hard-won victories might have been simply surviving another winter, another battle, another forced march, perhaps clinging to fragments of their Roman identity, their language, their discipline, even as the memory of Rome itself faded into a distant dream. The significant breakthrough that seems near, yet remains elusive, is definitive archaeological proof. A Roman eagle standard buried in Chinese soil, a Latin inscription found near Lycian, a cache of identifiable Roman military equipment. Without such direct physical evidence, the story of the lost legion reaching China remains a compelling but ultimately speculative historical detective story. The true depth of the mystery is that these men, once cogs in the mighty Roman war machine, effectively vanished from Western historical records after their capture at Carrhae. Their subsequent fate, their potential two-decade odyssey across Central Asia, is pieced together from fragmentary textual clues from a completely different civilization, interpreted across a vast cultural and linguistic divide. The silence of the Roman sources on their fate, after Margiana is telling, Rome, for all its power, could not reach them, could not save them. They were truly lost. If they did fight at Gizi's side, they were fighting not for Rome, but for survival, or for new masters. Their old allegiances long since rendered meaningless by distance and time. The image of Roman legionaries, masters of the testudo, deploying their fish-scale formation against Han Chinese crossbowmen on the steppes of Central Asia, is an extraordinary one. A clash of worlds that almost beggars belief. Yet, the clues, however faint, however debated, continue to fuel the imagination and drive the unraveling enigma of the lost legion of Crassus. The question lingers, did a handful of Rome's eagles find their final resting place, not in Parthian dust, but under the shadow of the Great Wall, their story waiting centuries to be whispered anew? The climax in the ongoing investigation into Crassus's lost legion is not a singular, definitive event from antiquity, but rather the cumulative weight of modern scholarly debate and the tantalizing, though still inconclusive, pieces of evidence that have emerged. The true turning point for public consciousness and historical inquiry was arguably Homer H. Dubbs's presentation of his theory in the mid-20th century. His meticulous linking of the fish-scale formation and palisade construction described in the Han Shu at the Battle of Carrhae, 36 BCE, with Roman military practices provided for the first time, a plausible, albeit highly speculative, narrative thread that extended the legionaries' journey beyond their Parthian captivity in Margiana. This was the revelation that ignited decades of further research, debate, and even popular imagination. The outcome of this specific battle for the warriors in the fish-scale formation was defeat. Zhiji Chanyu was killed, and the Han Chinese forces were victorious. The Han Shu records that some of these foreign mercenaries were captured, and, as Dubbs highlighted, subsequently settled by the Han authorities in a newly established county named Lycian in what is now Gansu province, near the edge of the Gobi Desert, along the Silk Road. This settlement, Lycion, becomes the focal point of the resolution, or rather the most concrete potential endpoint, for the odyssey of these lost Romans, if indeed they were Romans. The truth unveiled here is complex and layered. What is certain is that the Battle of Carrhae was a devastating defeat for Rome, and many thousands of legionaries were captured and moved east by the Parthians. What remains a compelling but unproven hypothesis is whether a significant contingent of these men, or their descendants, traveled a further 2,000 miles east over the subsequent 17 years to fight at Gizeh and then settle in Lycion. The investigation by modern historians and archaeologists has yielded intriguing but not definitive proof. The historical and anthropological research into Lycion and its inhabitants has been a key part of this modern inquiry. In recent times, the village of Zelaiegai, believed to be near the site of ancient Lycion, has garnered international attention due to some of its inhabitants exhibiting supposedly Caucasian features, lighter hair, blue or green eyes, taller stature, and local traditions that speak of Roman ancestry. DNA studies conducted on some of these villagers have produced mixed and often debated results. Some studies have shown a slightly higher percentage of Western Eurasian genetic markers compared to surrounding Han Chinese populations, while others have found no significant deviation, or have attributed the markers to much later Silk Road migrations and intermarriages, for example with Sogdians or other Central Asian peoples. The evidence is tantalizing but far from conclusive. It's a classic case where the desire for a romantic historical connection often outpaces the hard scientific data. The archaeological findings in and around Yongchang County, modern Lycion, have also been scrutinized. While no distinctly Roman military artifacts like legionary armor, weapons, or eagle standards have been unearthed, some discoveries, such as tombs with supposedly non-Han burial practices or certain pottery styles, have been cited by proponents of the Roman connection. However, these too are open to alternative interpretations, often pointing towards the diverse cultural influences common along the Silk Road. The lack of definitive Roman material culture remains the most significant challenge to Dub's theory. The reflection and meaning of the Lost Legion story, even if the Lycian connection remains unproven, is profound. It speaks to the incredible resilience and adaptability of soldiers in ancient times, the vastness and interconnectedness of the ancient world, even between seemingly distant empires like Rome and Han China, and the enduring power of a good historical mystery. It highlights how fragmented historical records from different cultures can sometimes, when pieced together, hint at extraordinary, otherwise unrecorded human journeys. The legend embodies the soldier's worst nightmare: defeat, capture, and exile to an unimaginably distant land, cut off forever from home. Yet, it also carries a thread of incredible human endurance. What was learned from this enduring enigma? Firstly, it underscores the limitations of our historical knowledge, especially concerning events on the fringes of great empires or involving peoples who left few written records of their own. Secondly, it demonstrates how myth and legend can sometimes preserve a kernel of historical truth, however distorted or embellished over time. The very persistence of the Romans in China story suggests it taps into something compelling, perhaps a folk memory or a plausible what-if scenario that resonates across cultures. Thirdly, it highlights the importance of interdisciplinary research, combining classical history, sinology, archaeology, and genetics in attempting to unravel such complex historical puzzles. The hidden histories revealed aspect is particularly potent here. Even if the Lycian connection is never definitively proven, the investigation itself has illuminated the fascinating interactions along the Silk Road, the multicultural nature of frontier zones, and the incredible distances ancient peoples sometimes traveled. It forces us to reconsider the neat boundaries we often draw between ancient civilizations and to imagine a more fluid, interconnected ancient world. The story of Crassus's lost legion serves as a powerful reminder of the human cost of imperial ambition and the unpredictable tides of history. These men, cogs in Rome's vast military machine, were thrust into an odyssey that took them far beyond the known Roman world, their fate becoming a historical puzzle that continues to intrigue and challenge us. Whether they truly reached China and founded a settlement whose descendants live there today, or whether they simply faded into the diverse populations of Central Asia, their story is one of profound loss, incredible endurance, and the enduring mystery of the forgotten. The tale of the lost legion of Crassus is a compelling, cold case from antiquity, filled with tantalizing clues and unanswered questions. What do you believe happened to these vanished Roman soldiers? Do the accounts from Han China offer a genuine glimpse of their fate, or is it a fascinating historical coincidence? Share your theories and insights in the comments below. Let's explore the boundaries of ancient empires together. If this journey into one of history's greatest military mysteries has captured your imagination, please consider liking this video and sharing it to help spread awareness of these incredible, often overlooked, historical enigmas. Your support helps Mythos Unearthed continue its quest to uncover the lost stories of our past. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our next investigation into a forgotten chapter of history, where legends meet archaeology and the whispers of the past are brought back to life. The eagles of Crassus may have vanished into the eastern sands, but the search for their legionaries and the truths their journey might reveal about the interconnectedness of the ancient world continues to inspire and fascinate. Their fate remains one of history's most poignant what-ifs, a testament to the soldiers lost at the very edge of empire.